Hey guys, David Robinson here with the Apartment Investing Journey. I'm excited about our episode today. I've got Ashley Wilson with me today. Ashley, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. My pleasure. A little bit about Ashley. She is the co-founder of Bar Down Investments and HouseItLook LLC and has almost 10 years of real estate experience. With Bar Down Investments, she has been involved in over 30 million of multifamily properties, consisting of over 450 units in both Texas and Ohio. Ashley and her father, Tom, also have a very successful high-end flipping business in Pennsylvania, HouseItLook LLC. Love the name, by the way,
Thank you.
which handles several million in transactions annually. When Ashley is not working on her businesses, she enjoys spending time with her family, including her husband and their two daughters. And she also enjoys competing with her horse. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
I don't think I've had a horse rider on the show yet, so that's great. Well, Ashley, as I do with all my guests, we want to really hear your journey and your story. So if you can, just back us up all the way. I always like to say you were born and then what?
Okay. Well, I was born and then I went to school and learned the importance of education. And that gave me the foundation to realize that anything I wanted to do in life was achievable all through the means of education. My grandfather used to say, it doesn't matter where you are educated, it matters what you do to make the most of the moment that you have and the opportunity you have to learn as much as possible. So I really took that to heart, and that still is the foundation that I have today. I was talking to one of my business partners earlier today, and he said it perfectly. He said that he likes to think of himself always in beta mode. And that's a good way to conceptualize how I think of myself too. I can never learn absolutely everything I need to know about a specific topic. I'm always open to learning more. And to that effect, my husband and I, very early on in our careers, we were blessed with the opportunity to make a good living from our jobs. My husband was a professional ice hockey player, and I worked in pharmaceuticals. I did clinical R&D, and I did project management for both U.S. trials originally, and then moving on to global trials. I didn't realize that gave me the foundation to understand how to manage from afar. So there's a lot of things in your career, whether or not you're in real estate investing today, that are carryovers that really help you be successful in real estate. And you don't realize it at the time, but when you look back, it's a good snapshot to see, 10 years or so ago, I was doing exactly this, but in a different sector. So approximately 10 years ago, my husband and I, when we were making this money, we didn't know what to invest in. And my husband is a very financially savvy person, and he kept circling back to real estate. Through his searches and education, we realized that real estate met our needs the best in terms of all the investment strategies that were out there. In terms of our comfort level with investing, the expected returns, we wanted the diversification of your investment, because in real estate, you can diversify your investment through markets, through different real estate sectors, whether it be commercial, residential, holding notes, which you can hold in either, or you can hold notes in business. I mean, there's a lot of different avenues in which you can invest. And we really liked the tax benefits of investing in real estate, and how investing in real estate was backed by a tangible physical asset at the end of the day, as opposed to the stock market, which is purely on speculation. So from there, we purchased our first property. We did short-term rentals and long-term rentals. And then we purchased another property and did long-term rental as well. We've house hacked our entire relationship. And for any listener who doesn't know what house hacking means, that means that you rent out another room or space in your living space. And basically someone pays your mortgage or pays part of your mortgage or can pay your mortgage plus some. We have done that our entire relationship. We've been together for almost 13 years. We have 2 kids. So anyone who says that, you know, it can't be done throughout different aspects of your life, from the time we first moved in together, we were house hacking. So there's, you know, if you need someone as an example that you can do it, you can do it. Even today, my brother and his wife live with us. So it is achievable. You know, you can do it. When my husband finished his career in the US, we moved overseas to Europe, and he played over there for 4 years in Russia and Europe. And during that time, I decided that I would resign from pharmaceuticals, and I went into real estate investing full-time by partnering with my father, who's a general contractor, and we flipped houses in Pennsylvania. So most people ask, how can you flip houses in Pennsylvania when you live in Europe? And what I like to say to them is, once you are able to streamline your business, anything is really possible. And you really have to force yourself out of working in your business so you can work on your business to figure out who can replace me and work in the business so I can work more on the business. And that's how we were able to grow the flipping business to the level that it is today. So we did that. That business just celebrated its 5th year in operations. My dad and I are very blessed to have flipped for the past 5 years. And approximately, I want to say almost 2 years ago, we got into multifamily. And the way we got into multifamily is when we were living in Europe, we always knew we wanted to get into multifamily, but we knew that it was something we probably needed more boots on the ground to have an impact in that space. Just from everything we had educated ourselves on within multifamily. So I stayed in touch with a lot of people back in the States. And when my husband retired about 2 years ago, I came back to the States and started networking with these people that I had been networking with while I was over in Europe. And we passively invested in our first apartment deal, which is in Ohio, 101 units. It's a stabilized property, cash flowing from day one. You know, it was just a nice opportunity to get our feet wet in terms of apartment syndication and multifamily ownership. I highly recommend for people who are a little bit trigger shy to jump into multifamily, or even if you are well versed in multifamily, I think it's still a really good opportunity for you to see the inner workings of how apartment ownership works. And no matter how experienced you are, if you work with another group, you'll see that there are a lot of different ways that you can get the same job done at the end of the day. So for us, that was a really good experience. And from there, we partnered with another group. And originally, I was supposed to just run construction management because I have a background in managing from afar and also construction knowledge with growing up as, my father is a GC and doing the flipping business. I was the only one in that group who had construction knowledge to execute the CapEx plan as opposed to outsourcing. So I was asked to come on and be a construction manager, and that actually snowballed into me being asset manager and construction manager at the same time. So I did that on 124 units in Houston. And from that experience, I started to get, I guess, a good reputation because I'm just very detail oriented, and going back to my education, desire to always learn, people just recognize the fact that I wasn't a very passive asset manager. I was very active. To this day, I know every little detail about a property, and even the property management company tells me continuously, we've never had an owner like you because you are so detail oriented, not in a micromanager type way, I just want to understand. And that's just how my brain works. So I've been asked to partner on a lot of properties actually, and run asset and construction management. I would probably say about 50 to 60 properties now where people have them under contract, but they want me to operate the property. And just from the way that I'm seeing people purchase properties, I have only moved forward with 2. And of those 2, I actually only moved all the, through closing on 1. So I think that too lends itself well because people know that I have very strict criteria. I think operating a property is a reflection of the team, and it's also a reflection of myself and my capabilities too. And I personally want to be known as someone who operates properties very well.
Yeah. Man, thank you for going into some detail about your background and your story leading up to, well, we'll talk about some of your more recent deals here in a second. But I want to go back a little bit and just get some clarification on a few things. First and foremost, how'd you meet your husband?
We both went to Colgate University, and after college, I came back to Philadelphia suburbs, and he ended up being traded to a team close to where I was living, and we reconnected, actually, embarrassingly, on Facebook.
Hey, it's more and more common, right? Okay, cool. And then I'm interested in what went through your mind. So you and your husband go out to Europe for 4 years, right? You hadn't started the flipping business before you went out to Russia. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what's going through your mind as you're out there? And were you still working in pharmaceuticals when you went to Russia, or did you exit that role?
So my husband went to Russia he went to Latvia first. The first year he was in Latvia, the second year he was in Russia. So the first year in Latvia, he left in July. I was still working for pharmaceuticals until October or November. So I work full-time from home. That's another skill set in terms of how to manage from afar, be self-motivated, driven, etc., blah, blah, blah. So I would go over and visit him for, a few weeks at a time, work over while I was working still in pharmaceuticals, and come back home. And I resigned from that in October, November timeframe. And then I moved over there full time. I could have moved over there full time beforehand, but to be honest with you, I was competing nationally for horseback riding at the time. And nationals, the finals and nationals were end of November. And to be honest, I won the nation that year in riding. So it was really important to me to be home to fulfill that goal.
Well, you just left that little piece out. You can add that in there, trying to be humble. I got it. Okay, so this is cool. I'm starting to get a little bit more of the picture here. So what I'm interested in hearing about, and which I think a lot of people will appreciate, or maybe they're in a similar situation where they have this desire to get into real estate. They understand some of the basic concepts and the benefits of being involved in real estate. But they may have another job. They may be, maybe have other commitments. And so I'm interested in how what the thought process and the actual physical process that you took to get the business up and running with your dad, and what was the role that you played in that, and what was the role that he played in that?
To your first question, I think you can tell someone who is driven through education is typically not someone who can sit still. So when I resigned from pharmaceuticals, I actually started 3 companies in between resigning from pharmaceuticals and starting up the business with my dad. The companies that I started were more things that I was personally connected to at the time. It wasn't from a long-term what would position us financially the best. Long-term, I wasn't really thinking in that mindset yet. What really changed my way of thinking was my husband is very smart too, and we have nerdy conversations. We don't watch a lot of TV. We spend a lot of time talking through crazy things. Like, for example, we were talking about why inflation is good for the US government last night because it lowers our debt owed to other countries if the dollar in America is stronger, has a stronger value. Like, these are the things we spend our time talking about instead of watching, you know, whatever the hit TV show is that night. So to that effect, we ended up talking a lot about what our next stage in life would look like. And it always was about being full-time real estate investors. So to me, what I was thinking in my mind was, why are we waiting to start this career once you're finished playing? Because why don't we go through the growing pains while you're playing and we have a quote unquote stable income to figure out that learning curve. And then once you retire, we'll have already built the foundation of our real estate career, gone through the growing pains, and be able to start scaling at that point. So that was really the idea. And it took a little bit of convincing for me to get him on board, but then he agreed. And then I just approached my father and asked him if he wanted to partner. Now, my father, his backstory is he's a 45-year contractor, has owned and operated his own business. He's worked on everything from Section 8, multifamily, commercial, multi-million-dollar mansions, everything in between. So he is extremely well-versed. He's very well-versed in historic properties. He has a lot of knowledge, but he's older and he can't physically do the work anymore. So I had already started to see him partner with other investors, and he had done flips before with people and for people. So to me, it was a no-brainer for us to partner with my father. My father could serve as the boots on the ground, and I could do anything that would help make his job easier. So people seem to think you can't find houses when you live from, you know, another state or another country. We leverage technology. We would use FaceTime. I actually identified every single house that we got. I did all of the design. I ordered the materials, scheduled the contractors. I mean, you would be surprised how much you can do from afar. And my dad served as the boots on the ground. He likes to call it, he did like adult daycare. He made sure people showed up, did what they said they were going to do, didn't get in fights, you know, so things like that. But that's really how we got started, you know, how my father and I got started. And today, my husband, now that he's retired, on the single family business, he actually does all of our transactions. He got his license and he's doing all of our transactions for purchasing and sales. He doesn't do retail, but he does our transactions. And then on multifamily, he does all the underwriting. He was a physics undergrad. He was supposed to go into engineering before he got drafted. So he was going to get his master's in engineering, and then, you know, hockey took him a different route.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So he got licensed in Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so just real quick, I'm curious about you sourcing deals, fix and flip deals from afar. What was that process like for you? What did you actually do to find the deals, and what technology did you use? That type of stuff. I'm curious.
It's funny because this is probably the number one question that I get asked in single family is, how do I find my properties? 90% of my properties I find on MLS, and people cannot believe that. In our area, flipping is huge and it's very competitive. But I would like to say there's a couple things that I did to make it more advantageous for us. First of all, we went after full gut rehabs. Most flippers don't want to do that. Second thing we did is we went after higher end homes. Anyone can scrape together, you know, $20,000, $30,000. But when you're going after homes where the acquisition price, you know, we're purchasing homes, $500,000, $600,000 homes, and then we're reselling them for, you know, $1 million plus. A lot of people don't want to take on that risk, but we could, and we had the knowledge in terms of my father to go after those homes. We also went after homes from the early 1900s to 1960s because we knew that people wouldn't touch those homes due to knob and tube wiring, new HVAC systems, and new plumbing. We were able to systematize that process and get that process down from 9.5 months to 9.5 weeks and do a full gut rehab. So a 6-figure rehab, soup to nuts, new roof, new mechanicals, new drywall, because most of the drywall in our area is plaster and over lath. So we really found our niche. And that's one thing that I speak about every time that I get asked to speak. In fact, I'm going to an event tonight and I'm speaking, and one of my slides is finding your niche. It's better to be excellent at one thing than to be mediocre at a bunch of things. And that speaks to multifamily, that speaks to single family, it really speaks across the board. The reason we were able to acquire the properties we did is because we knew our niche. So we knew when a property came up that met that criteria, whether or not it was a good deal, because we were so focused. And the other thing is, I really know the market that we were going after. So for example, we purchased this one property and we purchased it for $235. Zillow had it in the low threes, and everything on that street was selling in the mid threes, rehabbed. I knew that that property was on the border of a really good area. Even though it was in a different school district, the location was dynamite. And I thought those houses on that street were undervalued. So that's the house we actually did. The first house we did in 9.5 weeks of a full gut rehab. We bought it for $235. We put it on the market the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and we sold it for $545 or $542, something like that. So we made 6-figure profit on it, but that is really knowing your market, really knowing what you're going after. That was an early 1900s home, full gut rehab. It was, totally within our wheelhouse. And it's something people overlook because they don't know the market. They don't know what they're looking for. They're just too open to saying yes to all different ideas. And someone once said to me, you say no until it's a hell yes. And that's kind of our mentality, especially in flipping. It's always no, no, no. Okay, yes, hell yes for that one. It needs to be worth your time.
Yeah, love that. And I love the competitive advantage niching down really gave you guys. So I can understand how you were able to find deals, especially even on the MLS. So that's great. So I want to transition a little bit into your multifamily business. You got into multifamily a couple of years ago, right about the same time that your husband had retired. Is that correct? Did
Correct.
I get that right? Okay.
Yes.
And you started out with a passive investment. You touched on this briefly, but maybe go into a little bit more detail about why you feel like that's a good way for investors to start and become familiar with the multifamily space.
The reason why I think it's a good way to get your feet wet is because multifamily, some people will claim multifamily that it's really easy. And to me, I think I've had people say, oh, multifamily is so easy. And to me, when someone says that, that means that they really don't understand all the nuances and all the creativity that can be had and you can realize in multifamily. Multifamily to me, I think is like a jigsaw puzzle. That's why it really intrigues me. Where, compared to single family, it's, wash and repeat kind of thing, or rinse, wash and repeat, whatever that saying is. But multifamily to me, there's just a lot of different ways to make money in the business. And there's a lot of different ways to make even more money in the business. Something could be a good deal, but you can make it a great deal. So with respect to learning from a passive investment first, I think first you have to understand the terminology and you have to really know mathematics and you have to understand how math works in this business and how it ties together in so many different aspects. One thing that I preach, and some people like me for saying this and other people don't like me for saying it, I honestly don't care, it's my personal belief, is that I believe that syndication teams, when there is not someone on that team who has construction experience, actual construction experience, knowledge, understanding, is doing a disservice to investors. That is not fully protecting the investment. And I'll tell you why. Anyone who has owned a house for a year minimum knows that you cannot own a house for a year without something going wrong on that house. You have to constantly keep up with a single family house. Well, now extrapolate that across 100 units, 3 to 5 year minimum hold, you're going to have something go wrong with that property. Even if it's an A-class brand new construction property, you're going to have something come up. Obviously, the risk on an A-class new construction is a lot less than a C-class, but today the hot property is value add, which are typically C-class properties. And therefore, the risk of things coming up, whether you identify it in DD or not, is pretty high. I think when you outsource construction management to a third-party vendor, you are now not ensuring that the interests are aligned. Third-party vendors are paid off of a percentage of the total CapEx cost, and therefore they are not driven by the same motivations that you as an apartment owner are driven by. For example, if a capital expense project costs $10,000 more, that really doesn't make all that much difference to a third-party vendor. They're getting probably 20% overhead on that $10,000. So it's really, they're not really motivated to find a way to not pay that $10,000. Furthermore, a project that takes a longer period of time, they don't understand the loss in rental income that you're getting, maybe the loss on the ability to refi by a certain period of time, and time is money. And in multifamily, that is exponentially important. And I think that having someone who is knowledgeable about construction management on your team is quintessential. I also think, knowing that now I've gone through 2 properties where I serve as both a construction and asset manager, that my plan, the business plan of the property is set when we purchase the property, but I can tell you right now that the business plan is a living document. You need to constantly be in tune to the demand of the market, what unit types are getting premiums, what unit types are renting, what market rates are, like ebbs and flows in the market, concessions that are being done, amenities that are being added, new construction that's coming on board. And I personally believe someone with asset and construction background can adjust while they're working in the business. So to me, I'll give like kind of a concrete example of that. If your plan is to do 100 units, renovate 100 units, and you're going to charge $150 premiums, and you start executing this plan without constantly getting a pulse on the market, you may have been able to do a partial upgrade versus a full upgrade and get $120 rent bumps as opposed to $150 rent bumps, and do more units because you're doing half the rehab. So you actually create a larger return on your investment, and you just change your business plan halfway through. And then it ends up being more lucrative in the long run in terms of the absorption rate in the market. The tenants can absorb $120 rent bump a lot easier than $150 rent bump. I mean, there's a lot of different factors. And to me, having someone on your team with that expertise and to be able to be nimble is protecting the overall investment.
Yeah, love that. I'm interested in your experience as an asset manager. What are some practical tips or advice that you can give to syndicators or newer investors that you've implemented as you've managed the asset that you have that has had an impact on the outcome? Like, what are some tips or strategies that you've used that may be outside of the ordinary?
Okay. I have a couple of examples of this.
Okay.
The first thing I would say, I'll give 2 examples. The first thing I would say is I talk to a lot of different asset managers to understand how they're operating properties. And there's a general trend among asset managers to treat property management companies as if they work for you, not with you. I think that is a really horrible mindset to have. Property management companies can make or break your deal. And a lot of people speak very ill on property management companies, and therefore they want to micromanage the property. There is lack of trust from day one, and they're not coming at it in a team mentality. They see the team as the GP, and they see the property management team as an outsider. The property management team could be your biggest asset on this property. I would personally involve them from day one. I would get their feedback back on the market, on your business plan. They should actually be included in helping you develop that business plan. They are not the investors, so they're coming at it from a different mindset, and you need to be respectful of that and cognizant of that when you're developing your plan. But at the end of the day, it's really important that you are not setting your property management team up to fail, and they are not resentful of you giving them a plan that they had no involvement in the creation. To that point, I think it's really critical to spend the extra time to find a property management team that is exceptional. You should not accept mediocrity for a property management team. And I think that if you do that, then that is the best way a property will be set up for success. So in particular for the property, the most recent acquisition, the Amarillo property that I have, it's called the Enclave. It's 225 units. That property, I spoke with the property management team that we have. I told them what our business plan is. They gave us feedback on the plan, and we have worked together to execute that plan. We have a very trustworthy relationship. That doesn't mean to say that I don't review financials. That doesn't mean to say that I'm not cross-checking the things that they're doing. What it means is that the reason why I'm cross-checking isn't because I doubt that they are being truthful and honest. It's more so I understand that human error can occur across any level. And I'm not looking for mistakes to place blame on them. If I find mistakes, it's typically a typo or misallocation, but it's never rooted in some ill intent. And I think people need to step away and stop thinking that property management companies are out to get these owners. There obviously are companies that do, but just because there are a few rotten eggs, I don't think that it's worth having this blanket negative feeling towards property management companies. I also think too that when you feel like a property management team is not well equipped to operate your property, which is, I've come across that before on several occasions, to be honest with you, you need to hire slow, fire fast. As soon as you get that gut feeling, you need to pull the trigger. Too many people are giving too much lax time for a property management team to get, their stuff together and get back on board on operating the property, but you're losing money during the process. You're losing the reputation that you're trying to build. There's a lot of reasons why you just need to cut your losses and move on. So that's the first thing that I would say in terms of a very organizational way of conducting business. The second tip I would give is we are in a position to do a lot of good as apartment owners. And I think people are not taking the opportunity as far as it can go. Any property that I'm involved in, it is paramount to me that not only do we create a safe, enjoyable living environment for our residents, but we create a beacon in the community. So all the properties that I'm involved in, I ensure that we are partnered with all local organizations, humane societies, schools, toy drive, shelters, churches. I mean, you name it, we're involved. And we cross-promote each other, and we do things to help build the community at large instead of just our tenants. To that effect, I do at least 1 to 2 community events a month, not just for the residents, but for the greater community. And I think that it's really important to do that because a lot of people say whenever you do good, you never have to worry it comes back to you tenfold. I can attest to that, but that's not the reason I'm doing it. The reason I'm doing it is because there's a lot of good that can be done with the position that we're in as apartment owners. And we can still operate a business. We can still be successful. I know at the end of the day, people just care about the dollar, and you're still making money. We're not giving up anything by doing that, but we're doing a lot of good that affects a lot of people's lives. And that at the end of the day is really important.
Love it. Those are great tips. And you touched on your 225 unit in Amarillo. I think this is a good segue. Let's talk about that and break it down just briefly. So this is a 25 unit or 225 unit C plus value add syndication deal, Amarillo, Texas. Looks like you purchased it for 10.35 million.
Correct.
And maybe if you can just describe the asset briefly for us, just to give us a sense of what it was.
So this property, unfortunately, was a property that was mismanaged previously by the ownership. I mean, well, you could say unfortunately / fortunately for us, unfortunate
Right.
for the existing tenants. A lot of tenants that were put into that apartment in the last few months were not qualified to be in there. So we had to get rid of a lot of tenants that were in the property. So specifically, 120 people left or were evicted or skipped, did not renew in the first 90 days. For anyone who doesn't really understand the magnitude of that, renewal rate is 50%. That's industry standard. So on a 225 unit, we should have 112.5 people leave the property over the course of the year. We had 120 in one quarter. That is a huge hit on the property. And it has taken us a very long time to rebuild the base with strong, good paying tenants. We in turn have dropped our delinquency. We've also lowered our month to month. So when you're analyzing a property, a lot of people get really excited by other income and they don't realize the breakdown of where that other income is coming from. A lot of times that's coming from month to month fees, late fees. There's like a good amount of late fees you want and a good amount of month to month, but then there's an excessive amount that actually is detrimental. So you really should not look at other income when it's high like that and see that as a good thing. So for our property, we've spent a lot of time repositioning it. With respect to the CapEx, we've done a tremendous amount of work at that property. We repainted the exterior, and that is, we have 24 buildings, so it's pretty big property. We've done trip hazards, life and safety issues like adding fire extinguishers to all units, which they didn't have. Smoke detectors, carbon dioxide detectors, exterior lighting, we switched to LED. The driveway we did. We are in the process of finishing up interior renovations. We've done a little over 80 units across the property. We've also had unexpected expenses, the age of the property, and then the lack of attention to ongoing maintenance of mechanicals from the previous ownership, wears on a property and it catches up at some point, and we had to take care of those issues. So we've had a gas line repair in terms of a whole gas line. We had to replace a whole gas line. We've had plumbing issues where we've had lines under the building break, and we're redoing lines, sewer lines, water lines. I mean, you name it. We've tackled it. We've also enhanced amenities with the pool. We did a new laundry contract, which is much more beneficial to us. We did a cable contract. We updated our leasing office. We added a business center. I mean, we've really done a lot in a short period of time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's great. How did you find the deal? How did you source the deal?
Actually, my partners did. So this is a property I had mentioned earlier that because of the first property and the reputation that I had built in terms of, my attention to detail with asset management, I was approached by a group that asked me if I'd be interested in running asset and construction management on the property. And the way I decide whether or not I'm going to do it is whether or not I'm going to put my own money in, because I actually put my own money in. So I ask for all of the information. I ask for all their due diligence, all of their underwriting, anything that they can give me to help me do my own analysis. My husband and I do our own analysis independently. We compare our analysis together, and then we compare that analysis to their analysis to see how we jive, which is probably why, out of the 60, 70 we've been asked to partner on, it's only yielded this one property. So we do our own investigation of the business plan as well. And then we ensure that, it's able to be executed. And I'm very fortunate to be working with this group of people because they're incredibly talented.
That's great. And do you know how they sourced the deal?
There was a broker connection that one of the partners had, and he was given the property actually almost a year before we acquired it. It was under contract for a while, and then it fell out of contract because there were some issues during the due diligence period. The seller then came back, lowered the price that the property was previously under contract for, and made the repairs concerning the original issues. And that's how it was able to go back under contract. And then we were able to close it in March.
That's great. That's great. And then how was the deal structured? And I know that your emphasis has been on the asset management side of things, but I'm just curious, do you know how the deal was structured with investors and GPs?
Do you mean like in terms of
The
like
split.
the 70-30 split? Yeah, 70-30 split with, we have an 8 pref, 17 plus IRR.
Okay, great. And did you have any involvement in raising capital? Obviously you invested personally in it, but did you have any involvement in helping to raise capital?
So I know my lane, and my lane is not raising capital. And I'm very transparent about that. Anytime someone comes to me, they ask me, can you run this property for us, be our asset and construction manager? Oh, by the way, can you raise capital? And my answer is always, I can run the property for you, but I cannot promise you anything on raising capital. Fortunately, because of how strict my own underwriting guidelines are, people have started to recognize that. And I do have a website where people can sign up. By doing these podcasts and talking about how strict my criteria is, like, for example, one thing that I haven't mentioned here is I look for recession resistance of a market. That's my number one criteria of determining whether or not I will invest in an area. And I have my own metrics of determining whether or not an area is recession resistance. It's tied closely to unemployment rate and how unemployment rate fared during the last recession. So there's other factors too, but just to get to that point, other investors, passive investors, have been following me through podcasts, and they've signed up on my website. So I put it out there that, I'm doing a property, and I've gotten a lot of people wanting to invest because they realize how strict my underwriting criteria is to partner. So I'm not actively seeking investors. I'm very fortunate that people see the value in what I'm doing, and people see the value in the approach that I'm taking to operating a property, and they feel comfortable knowing that I will not work on a property that I won't put my own money in, and that I'm putting my own money in, and that I'm scrutinizing it to such a level in terms of my due diligence before I'll even decide to partner, that I'm not blinded by an acquisition fee or an asset management fee or the upside of appreciation, because I see that as soon as the market does correct itself, we can argue all day long on when or how it'll be corrected. My play is that I want to ensure that hopefully if there is a correction that impacts the markets, that we are still in a position to do well during that downturn.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that detail. And, it's interesting. I'm hearing a theme in this conversation, which is great. And that is, niching down and really focusing and staying in your lane. And clearly, just in the way that you speak, I'm sure I can see why you've had, 50 to 60 syndicators reach out to you for asset management. It comes across, you're passionate about it. It's in your lane, it's your wheelhouse, it's your superpower, and that's a great place to be. So congratulations on that.
Thank you
Well,
very much.
we need to start winding down here a little bit, but I've got 4 final questions I want to ask you. Just want to get your knee-jerk gut reaction to. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. What's the biggest mistake you've made so far on your apartment investing journey that we could all learn from?
Jumping too quick into a partnership.
Okay. Do you mind elaborating on that just a little bit?
I understood each partner in a silo, but I didn't understand how they work together and who trumps who. Really to understand the inner workings when things go wrong, how people will react, and whose opinion matters more in the greater group. I kind of assumed it was based off of GP ownership when really that wasn't the case. So I think as a tip for other people who want to get involved right away, just because you own a majority share in the GP, sometimes that does not mean that you have majority say. And I'm not saying I had majority say, I'm just saying someone else did.
Sure.
And I assumed that their opinion would trump all others, and that wasn't the case. And, just kind of understanding the inner workings of a GP.
Great. Love it. What's the biggest win you've had on your apartment investing journey so far?
Partnership. So my biggest loss and my biggest win is partnership. The partnership team that I have on the Enclave is one of them. I mean, it's a dream partnership. The support and the expertise that people have in their own lane is unbelievable. I mean, just the granular level of details that people have. I mean, they can speak on, we can have a conversation and we have all the answers on the line. And that's profound. And also to the support that everyone has for each other and respect and, stay in your lane. That was the problem I had before, is kind of understanding how people, weren't staying in their lane. And then in this partnership, it's unbelievable.
That's great. What's the best advice you have for someone who's just starting their apartment investing journey?
Education's key. Make sure that you're constantly putting yourself out there, learning as much as you can, ask questions, read, listen to podcasts, do searches on forums if you're unsure, figure out what your strength is. A lot of people default to raising capital, and that is, here, like, I'm a walking example. My strength is not raising capital, but I was able to figure out a way to partner with people and be involved in ownership of apartments. You can do the same thing. Maybe your strength is marketing. Maybe you're great at Instagram and building websites and investor communications. Maybe you could position yourself as a partner on a GP and taking over that. Maybe it's accounting. I mean, there's so many facets of multifamily. Just don't assume that someone else's path before you is your path. Make your own path, figure out your skills, and just kill it.
Love it. Great advice. Last question I have for you. How can people get in touch with you to learn more about what you have going on and really just connect?
You can find me at badashinvestor.com. I also have an Instagram page, badashinvestor, and Facebook page. From there, you can link to my websites, and also my contact information is on there as well.
Awesome. And we'll have all that info in the show notes as well. So, man, Ashley, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed our time together. You've gone into a ton of detail. You clearly are passionate about this avenue of the business, especially asset management and construction management. And your past experience lends itself well to what you're doing now. And it definitely comes through in conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time, sharing your thoughts and sharing your journey, and hope to connect with you again soon.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.